When the power goes out, most people stare at their stove like it personally betrayed them. But cooking without gas or electricity isn't a mystery. It's just knowledge that got pushed aside when modern appliances made it unnecessary. Today we're covering the secret way to cook during a blackout, no gas, no electricity needed. The problem with how modern kitchens are designed. The modern kitchen is built around two assumptions. Electricity is always available, and gas is always flowing. Induction cooktops, electric ovens, microwave ovens, electric kettles, all of them useless the moment the grid goes down. Even gas stoves in newer construction often have electronic ignition systems that require electricity to spark the burner. The pilot light that older gas stoves used to have, the one that burned continuously and needed no outside power, has largely been engineered out of modern residential construction in favor of electronic ignition. So, in a blackout, even households with gas lines may find themselves unable to cook. The ones who know about this limitation ahead of time can work around it. A long match or a lighter held to a gas burner will ignite it even without the electronic spark. But the broader point stands. The modern kitchen is not designed with resilience in mind. The result is that most households have no functional cooking capability the moment the infrastructure goes down. Not for a day, not for a week, for as long as the outage lasts, and in major disasters, that can be considerably longer than most people plan for. The cooking methods covered here are not primitive or inconvenient. Most of them have been in continuous use by billions of people worldwide for decades or centuries, and several produce results that are genuinely superior to conventional cooking in specific applications. They simply require a different way of thinking about heat, fuel, and time. It's also worth establishing what cooking actually requires in a grid-down scenario. The priority isn't replicating the full repertoire of a modern kitchen. It's producing hot, safe, calorie-sufficient food from shelf-stable ingredients consistently over an extended period. Rice, beans, lentils, oats, pasta, canned goods, dried vegetables. These are the actual food supply for most preparedness-minded households, and every cooking method discussed here handles them effectively. The person who expected to keep making fresh pasta with a 40-minute reduction sauce in a grid failure was not the intended audience. Before we continue, I prepared a step-by-step ebook that's currently on sale, packed with practical survival systems and simple life hacks. It's designed to help you save money, stay prepared, and improve everyday safety in a simple, realistic way. You can access it instantly while the discounted price is still available. You can find the link in the description. Now let's get back to the video. The rocket stove. Efficiency built from sticks. The rocket stove is one of the most fuel-efficient combustion cooking devices ever designed, and it was formalized in its modern form by Dr. Larry Winiarski in the 1980s through work at the Preparedness Research Center in Oregon. The core insight behind it is simple but non-obvious. Most open fires waste the majority of their energy through incomplete combustion and misdirected heat. A rocket stove addresses both problems with geometry. The basic design is an L-shaped combustion chamber. Fuel, typically small diameter sticks, about the size of a wrist or smaller, is fed horizontally into one end of the L. The vertical section acts as a chimney that creates a strong draft, pulling air through the fuel bed and driving very complete, very hot combustion at the elbow of the LA cooking surface sits directly above the flame exit at the top of the vertical section. The result is a concentrated, intense flame that directs essentially all of its heat upward into the cooking pot rather than out to the sides. The fuel efficiency improvement over an open fire is substantial. Published testing from Preparedness Research Center found that rocket stoves use roughly 18 to 75% less fuel than traditional three-stone fires, the most common cooking setup used by an estimated 2.8 billion people worldwide as of the early 2020s, according to the World Health Organization. For a household cooking on biomass in a grid-down scenario, that difference means the same pile of wood lasts dramatically longer. Rocket stoves can be built from materials as simple as 4 concrete blocks, arranged to form the L shape, with a gap left for air intake at the fuel feed end. They can also be purchased as dedicated commercial units, the StoveTech, the EcoZoom Versa, and similar designs, for between $50 and $150. These manufactured versions add features like insulated combustion chambers for even better efficiency and grate systems for ash management. But the 4-block improvised version works, which is exactly the kind of redundancy that matters when the alternative is not eating. The operational technique matters. Feeding the fire correctly, pushing sticks in from the feed end as they burn down rather than loading a large pile, maintains the intense, clean combustion the design depends on. Pots with flat bottoms and lids perform best. A lid on a pot reduces cooking time significantly by trapping steam and heat, which becomes relevant when fuel is limited. One often noted advantage of the rocket stove over an open fire or standard campfire is smoke management. Because the combustion is more complete, a correctly operated rocket stove produces significantly less smoke than an open fire burning the same wood. This matters for health. Smoke inhalation during extended cooking over open fires is a significant health burden in populations that rely on biomass cooking. And it also matters for visibility and discretion in a grid-down community scenario where drawing attention isn't necessarily desirable. Solar ovens. Cooking with nothing but light. The solar oven sounds like something from a science fair project. It is not. It is a functional cooking technology that has been used in developing nations, disaster relief operations, and off-grid households for decades, and its capabilities are considerably more impressive than most people expect on first encounter. The principle is straightforward. Sunlight contains a meaningful amount of energy, roughly 1,000 watts per square meter at the Earth's surface under optimal conditions. A solar oven uses reflective panels to concentrate that energy onto a dark-colored cooking pot or chamber, which absorbs it as heat. An insulated box design traps that heat, and temperatures inside a well-designed solar box oven typically reach between 250 and 400 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cook, bake, and pasteurize water. The most widely tested and documented solar oven design is the box oven, a reflective outer lid that focuses sunlight into an insulated inner box with a clear glazing panel on top. The inner box is black or dark-colored to maximize heat absorption, and the glazing, typically glass or heavy clear plastic, traps the solar energy through the greenhouse effect. A good commercial box oven, such as the Sun Oven, which has been in production since 1986, reaches temperatures sufficient for baking bread, cooking rice, pasteurizing water, and slow-cooking meats. The global Sun Oven holds a stable 325 to 360 degrees Fahrenheit in good sunlight and has been tested and deployed by humanitarian organizations in multiple countries. What solar ovens genuinely cannot do: cook quickly. A pot of rice that takes 20 minutes on a gas burner takes 45 minutes to an hour in a solar oven. Bread that bakes in 35 minutes conventionally may take an hour and a half in solar. This is a scheduling inconvenience, not a fundamental limitation. You start the solar oven earlier and plan accordingly. The fuel cost is zero. The noise is zero. The carbon monoxide risk is zero. For slow-cooked dishes, stews, beans, and bread, the solar oven is genuinely excellent. The homemade parabolic solar cooker, which focuses sunlight to a point rather than into a box, reaches considerably higher temperatures and can bring water to a boil quickly, but requires more precise construction and more careful handling. The box oven is the practical starting point for most households. A well-made solar box oven can also be constructed at home for under $20 in materials: a cardboard box, aluminum foil, black paint, and a sheet of glass or heavy-duty clear plastic. The construction isn't complicated. The core principle is maximizing reflective surface area directing sunlight through the glazing and maximizing insulation around the cooking chamber. Prepper and sustainability communities have documented hundreds of homemade builds with consistent, usable results. Peak temperatures in a well-built home unit typically land between 200 and 300 degrees Fahrenheit, lower than commercial units, but sufficient for cooking most foods given adequate time. Solar cooking requires direct sunlight. Overcast days reduce efficiency significantly. In northern latitudes during winter, solar angle and day length limit usefulness during the months when heating and cooking needs are highest. A solar oven is therefore most valuable as a component of a diversified cooking strategy rather than a standalone solution. Thermal cookers, the method that uses almost no fuel. A thermal cooker, also called a retained heat cooker, fireless cooker, or wonderbox, is almost certainly the most underrated cooking technology on this list. It requires a heat source to begin cooking, but then requires no heat at all to finish. The food cooks itself inside an insulated container, using only the heat that was already in the food. The principle has been in use for over a century. Norwegian fishermen in the early 20th century used a Norwegian cooking bag, a hay-filled insulated box, to slow-cook fish stews on long voyages where fuel was limited. Versions of the same technology have been used across Europe, Africa, and Asia in various forms. The modern commercial thermal cooker is typically two nested stainless steel pots, an inner cooking pot and an outer insulated container, that hold temperatures high enough to complete cooking over periods of 2 to 8 hours. The process is simple. Bring food to a full boil or near boil in the inner pot using any heat source: rocket stove, open fire, camp stove, whatever is available. Once the food has reached the target initial temperature, seal the inner pot inside the insulated outer container and leave it alone. The thermal mass of the hot food and pot maintains temperatures above 160 degrees Fahrenheit, safe for food without additional bacterial growth, for several hours while the food continues to cook from its own retained heat. The fuel saving is significant. A typical meal using a thermal cooker requires only 10 to 15 minutes of active heating, rather than 30 to 60 minutes of sustained boiling. Published testing from various humanitarian aid organizations puts the fuel savings at 50 to 80% compared to conventional stovetop cooking of the same dishes. Whole grains, legumes, root vegetables, stews, and soups, the staples of a long-term food storage diet, are exactly the kinds of foods that benefit most from this slow, low-energy cooking method. Commercial thermal cookers, the Shuttle Chef by Thermos is probably the best-known brand, run between $60 and $150. The functionality can also be improvised with a large, heavy-lidded pot wrapped in towels and blankets inside a cardboard box or laundry basket. The performance of the improvised version is meaningfully lower than a purpose-built insulated container, but the concept works. In a true grid-down scenario where a thermal cooker was not acquired in advance, this improvisation is worth knowing about. One detail that experienced cooks consistently emphasize: the food needs to be fully at temperature before transferring to the insulated container. Food that was barely simmering when it went in will not finish cooking. The retained heat cooking process is not a slow cooker that applies ongoing heat. It's a coast to completion from a standing temperature. Start hot, finish anywhere. Thermal cookers also have one genuinely remarkable quality that separates them from every other cooking method on this list. They can be started in the morning, left unattended all day, and the food will be ready and still hot at dinner time without burning, drying out, or requiring any monitoring. For households managing multiple priorities in a grid-down scenario, water collection, security, childcare, logistics, the ability to start a meal and forget about it for 6 hours is not a minor convenience. It's a meaningful reduction in the cognitive and physical load of keeping a household functioning. Wood gasification stoves. The cleaner burn. Wood gasification stoves, sometimes marketed as gasifier stoves or TLUD stoves, top-lit updraft, are a more recent development in biomass cooking technology and represent a significant advance in clean combustion over conventional open fires or basic rocket stoves. In a standard wood fire, combustion is incomplete. Not all of the burnable material in the wood actually burns. Much of it escapes as smoke, particulates, and partially combusted compounds, which is both a health problem and a waste of fuel energy. A wood gasification stove changes the combustion sequence. Wood is loaded into a cylindrical combustion chamber and lit from the top. As the top layer burns, it produces hot gases that rise through the remaining unburned wood, gasifying the volatile compounds. These gases are then burned at the top of the chamber in a secondary combustion stage, where they meet fresh air and burn very cleanly, with a blue, near-smokeless flame. The visual signature of a properly functioning gasifier stove is a nearly invisible flame at the top and very little visible smoke. This clean combustion has two direct benefits: significantly reduced harmful emissions compared to conventional wood combustion, and higher fuel efficiency because more of the wood's energy content is converted to heat rather than escaping as particulates. Commercial gasification stoves, the BioLite Camp Stove, the Silverfire Hunter, and similar designs are available at prices from $50 to several $100s. The BioLite specifically includes a thermoelectric generator that converts some of the fire's heat to electricity, providing enough power to charge a phone or run LED lights from a small wood fire. That capability doesn't resolve the broader grid failure, but it's a meaningful bonus in a situation where every watt of off-grid power generation matters. The fuel for gasification stoves is the same as for rocket stoves: small diameter dry biomass. Dry wood, wood pellets, biomass briquettes, pine cones, and similar materials all work. The key operational requirement is that fuel must be reasonably dry. Wet or green wood produces steam that disrupts the clean gasification process and brings the smoke back. The camp stove, bridging the gap. For households that want a straightforward backup cooking capability without learning new techniques or building anything, a quality camp stove with a fuel supply is the simplest answer. It's not as interesting as the other methods on this list, but it works immediately, requires no learning curve, and handles any cooking task a conventional stove handles. A propane camp stove, the classic two-burner Coleman design, has been in continuous production since the 1950s. Runs on 1-pound propane canisters or with an adapter hose from a standard 20-pound barbecue tank. A 20-pound tank running a two-burner stove at medium heat provides roughly 9 to 10 hours of burn time according to manufacturer specifications, spread across days of normal cooking use. For a household planning for a 2-week outage with 2 cooked meals per day, a pair of 20-pound tanks covers the fuel requirement with reserve. Butane stoves, common in Asian cooking and increasingly popular in American kitchens as portable induction alternatives, use individual butane canisters and are compact and lightweight. They're excellent for a single person or couple, but can struggle in cold temperatures, as butane's vapor pressure drops significantly below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which means the stove may perform poorly precisely when heating and cooking needs are highest. The absolute requirement with any indoor-capable consideration: propane and butane stoves produce carbon monoxide and should never be used inside an enclosed living space. Never. The cases of carbon monoxide poisoning in disaster scenarios are consistently traceable to someone deciding to bring the camp stove or charcoal grill indoors because the weather was bad. Carbon monoxide is odorless, colorless, and produces symptoms: headache, drowsiness, confusion, that are easily attributed to the stress of the situation rather than the actual cause. Outdoor use only, or under a wide-open overhead coverage like a screen porch with maximum ventilation. Charcoal and the importance of carbon monoxide. Charcoal deserves specific discussion because it is the most commonly improvised backup cooking method, and it comes with the most significant safety risk of anything on this list. A standard charcoal briquette produces roughly the same heat output as a comparable amount of propane, but it also produces dramatically more carbon monoxide. The CPSC, Consumer Product Safety Commission, estimates that charcoal grills used indoors are responsible for roughly 50 deaths per year in the United States, and that number spikes during major power outages. After Hurricane Hugo in 1989, Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and Winter Storm Uri in 2021, carbon monoxide poisoning from indoor charcoal use accounted for a meaningful proportion of disaster-related fatalities beyond those caused directly by the event. Used outdoors, charcoal is a perfectly viable cooking fuel. A standard charcoal chimney starter, the cylindrical metal device that lets you light charcoal without lighter fluid, gets a batch of coals ready in about 15 minutes without any chemical accelerants. Charcoal briquettes stay hot for 30 to 45 minutes. Lump hardwood charcoal burns hotter and longer. A bag of charcoal stored in a dry location stays viable essentially indefinitely, which makes it a practical fuel storage option. The boundary is absolute, outdoors only. Not a garage with the door open, not a covered porch with sides. Outside, in open air, with no enclosures limiting air circulation. The haybox cooker, a technique older than most countries. The haybox cooker is the direct predecessor of the modern thermal cooker, and it works on exactly the same principle. Surround hot food with enough insulation to maintain cooking temperatures without additional fuel. The name comes from the most commonly available insulation material in agricultural communities: hay. A wooden box lined with hay, or a pot wrapped in blankets and wool, can maintain temperatures sufficient for slow cooking over several hours. During World War I and World War II, haybox cooking was actively promoted in Britain and the United States as a fuel conservation measure. Government publications of the era, including pamphlets from the British Ministry of Food, instructed households in haybox technique as a standard part of wartime domestic management. Recipes were specifically adapted for the method. The logic was that a household cooking with a haybox used a fraction of the coal or gas that conventional stovetop cooking required. The technique requires no commercial equipment. A large pot with a tight lid, a cardboard box or wooden box larger than the pot, and enough insulating material, old towels, wool blankets, crumpled newspaper, straw, to surround the pot on all sides and above. Bring the food to a boil on whatever heat source is available, seal the lid tightly, nestle the pot into the insulating material in the box, close or cover the box, and leave it for the required time. A stew or soup might cook for 3 to 4 hours in a haybox. Dried beans or whole grains may need 5 to 8 hours. The energy savings are equivalent to a commercial thermal cooker, 50 to 80% reduction in fuel compared to conventional stovetop cooking. The performance is somewhat lower than a purpose-built insulated unit because cardboard, newspapers, and blankets don't insulate as well as the vacuum-insulated stainless steel in commercial thermal cookers. But in a situation where no commercial option is available, the improvised haybox is not a compromise, it's a genuine solution. Water pasteurization, a critical side application. Any blackout cooking setup also needs to address water. When the municipal water treatment system fails, which it does in extended grid outages when backup power for treatment plants and pump stations runs out, water needs to be treated before drinking. Boiling is the standard recommendation, but it requires sustained fuel expenditure at a time when fuel is a managed resource. Water pasteurization is the alternative. Pathogens in drinking water, bacteria, viruses, protozoa, are killed at temperatures considerably below boiling. The World Health Organization's guidelines state that water held at 149 degrees Fahrenheit, 65 degrees Celsius, for just 1 minute is safe to drink. At 160 degrees Fahrenheit, pasteurization is essentially instantaneous. The WAPI, Water Pasteurization Indicator, is a small, inexpensive device consisting of a polycarbonate tube containing a soy wax pellet that melts at 160 degrees Fahrenheit. When the wax melts, the water has reached pasteurization temperature and is safe. No boiling required. In practice, this means a solar oven can pasteurize a quart of water in clear sunlight without ever bringing it to a boil. A rocket stove or camp stove can pasteurize the same water in 3 to 4 minutes of heating rather than the 8 to 10 minutes required to achieve a full rolling boil. Over a week of water treatment for a household, the fuel saving adds up to something meaningful. Building a diversified cooking strategy. No single alternative cooking method covers every scenario. A solar oven is useless in 3 days of overcast weather. A rocket stove is impractical in a dense urban apartment. A camp stove runs out of fuel in a multi-week outage without careful rationing. The rational approach is a layered system where different methods cover each other's gaps. A practical diversified kit for a suburban household might look like this. A commercial camp stove with 2 20-pound propane tanks for immediate, reliable capability. A solar box oven for fuel-free cooking on clear days. A rocket stove or gasification stove for efficient biomass cooking when propane runs low. A thermal cooker or haybox setup to stretch whatever fuel source is available as far as possible. The total cost of this 4-layer system, bought sensibly, with some items constructed rather than purchased, is roughly $300 to $500. Seasoned preparedness instructor Creek Stewart, who has written extensively on grid-down survival, made the point simply, your ability to cook a hot meal is about far more than nutrition. It maintains morale, creates routine, and signals that life continues with some normalcy. It matters more than people realize until they don't have it. The cooking skills matter as much as the equipment. Someone who knows how to manage a fire, start coals efficiently, time a haybox, and orient a solar oven is meaningfully more capable than someone who has all the hardware but no practice with it. Running a rocket stove, using a thermal cooker, or baking bread in a solar oven before it's necessary, as a weekend activity, as deliberate practice, means the learning curve is behind you when conditions are less forgiving. A few practical notes that cut across all the methods here. Flat-bottomed pots with lids outperform everything else on any alternative cooking setup. They transfer heat more efficiently from the cooking surface and trap steam that accelerates cooking time. Dark-colored pots absorb radiant heat better in solar cooking applications. Cast iron, while heavy, holds heat exceptionally well and works on every heat source from open fire to rocket stove to solar oven. If one pot or pan is going into a preparedness kit, a cast iron Dutch oven covers more bases than any other single piece of cookware. Fuel storage is a separate but connected subject. Propane is the most energy-dense and shelf-stable common cooking fuel. Stored in sealed containers, it keeps indefinitely. Charcoal in sealed bags keeps for several years in dry conditions. Wood fuel needs to be dry and protected from moisture, which requires covered storage. Butane canisters are best stored above freezing. Knowing the storage requirements and the shelf life of each fuel type is as important as having it. The combination of methods outlined here, rocket stove, solar oven, thermal cooker, gasification stove, camp stove, and the improvised hay box as a backstop, represents a genuinely comprehensive cooking capability that doesn't depend on the grid, doesn't require specialized skills beyond what a few hours of practice can provide, and can sustain a household through an extended outage on minimal ongoing fuel expenditure. None of it is exotic, all of it works. The one thing nobody thinks about: cooking smells. In a serious grid-down scenario that extends beyond a few days, cooking smells carry farther and mean more than they do normally. A neighborhood without power where most households have no food preparation capability will notice the smell of a hot meal being prepared. This is worth thinking about, not as a reason not to cook, but as a reason to think about when and how visibly you're managing it. This isn't paranoia, it's a consistent observation from disaster responders and emergency management professionals who have worked extended post-disaster scenarios. Cooking at less conspicuous times, managing smoke output from combustion stoves by using dry fuel and proper technique, and being aware of the social dynamics of a neighborhood under stress are practical considerations that experienced preparedness planners include in their thinking. It's also a reason that silent, fuel-free cooking methods, the solar oven in particular, and the thermal cooker after the initial heating phase, have advantages beyond efficiency. If this video added something useful to your thinking about grid-down cooking, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this content reach more people. And subscribe to the channel for more practical preparedness content built around real methods, not wishful thinking.